Welcome to the Explainer, fellow focused learners. Let's jump right into this. Today, we're embarking on a pretty incredible linguistic journey to uncover the true sounds of ancient Greek. And right off the bat, I want to explicitly credit the foundational research of Professor Maestri Gilbson Gomez-Bento. His extensive work mapping out the phonetic and phonological evolution of this magnificent language is absolutely crucial, and it's what makes today's exploration possible. So I want you to picture this for a second. Imagine Socrates defending himself in the courts of classical Athens, or early Christians passionately debating the New Testament. How did their Greek actually sound? Well, if you studied ancient Greek in a standard Western school or university, you probably think you know. But brace yourself, because we're about to drop a bit of a bombshell here. That pronunciation system taught in most modern classrooms, it's basically a Renaissance myth.
Okay, let's dive into this. Here is our roadmap for the explainer. We'll look at the Greek alphabet, the Erasmian myth, Attic, Koine, and Lucian pronunciations. A few phonetic plot twists, pitch versus stress, and finally, modern Greek.
All right, part 1, the Greek alphabet evolution. So the Greek alphabet, as we know it, evolved from Semitic origins, eventually locking in those classic 24 letters from alpha to omega. What's really fascinating is how this was taught. In ancient Athens, kids actually learned their letters by singing syllables. The 5th century comic poet Callias even wrote this whole alphabet tragedy, where the chorus literally sang combinations of consonants and vowels. But here is the critical takeaway for us. While those 24 symbols remained remarkably static over millennia, the way they actually sounded when spoken shifted radically across the centuries. Which brings us to part 2. The Erasmian pronunciation system. Now, you might be familiar with the Erasmian pronunciation. It's a speculative 16th century reconstruction of ancient Greek phonetics, obviously named after the famous scholar Desiderius Erasmus. But get this, the evidence suggests Erasmus likely never even used this system himself. He actually learned and spoke a modern Byzantine Greek. His famed reconstructed system was really just a speculative academic fable, a dialogue between a lion and a bear, of all things, that somehow spread like wildfire and got adopted by universities worldwide. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is it shows just how highly artificial the Erasmian system actually is. As it spread across Europe, it basically morphed to fit the local accents of the scholars using it. Just look at the letter zeta. In English classrooms, it's pronounced as z. In Germany, it's zets. In France, it's just z. And the same exact thing happens with vowels like upsilon, stretching from an English oo to a French oi. The Erasmian system isn't some historically accurate standard at all. It's a chameleon that completely changes depending on the native language of whoever happens to be speaking it. Moving right along to part 3, Attic, Koine, and Lucian. To keep our bearings in all this history, let's anchor ourselves to this timeline of the 5 main pronunciation systems. We start way back in the 5th century BC with the classical Attic pronunciation, which was expertly reconstructed by W. Sidney Allen. Then fast forward to the 1st century AD, and we hit Hellenistic Koine Greek, mapped out by Benjamin Cantor. By the 2nd century AD, we arrive at the Lucian pronunciation, this high-register imperial standard pioneered by Luc Ranieri. And finally, this entire chain leads directly into the modern Greek spoken today. Now, Professor Bento's research brilliantly tracks exactly how the consonants shifted across these eras. Notice the aspirated stops here. Over in the 5th century BC Attic column, letters like theta, phi, and chi were hard, explosive sounds with a literal puff of air. But watch what happens as we move into the Koine and Lucian eras. You can actually see the IPA symbols change. Those hard stops begin to soften into the continuous friction sounds that we hear in modern Greek today. It's a beautifully clear, documented evolution. And as you'll see, there is an equally dramatic shift with the vowels and diphthongs. Professor Bento's breakdown here shows us that back in the Attic period, vowels were very distinct from one another and their length mattered immensely. But follow the letter eta across the timeline. It starts out as a long, open S sound, but by the Koine period, it's closing up, moving drastically toward an E sound. By the time we hit the Lucian and modern eras, multiple distinct vowels have just totally collapsed into that exact same E space. That brings us to part 4, fricativization, itacism, and solosis. So what's actually causing these shifts? Well, first up is fricativization. Don't let the technical term scare you. This is simply the linguistic process where hard, explosive stop consonants gradually soften into continuous, breathy friction sounds, which linguists call fricatives. Think of this as the mechanical engine that changes how consonants actually feel inside the speaker's mouth over the centuries. And this brilliantly illustrates that exact concept. On the left, we have the Attic pronunciation of the letter phi. It was an aspirated P, pronounced with a hard pop and a puff of air, kind of like the P in the English word pot. But look over at the right side. By the time we reach Koine and modern Greek, fricativization has softened that hard pop into a continuous fricative sound, like in the word fit. This same process happened across several letters, and it profoundly changed the whole auditory texture of the spoken language. Next up, we have a massive vowel shift known as eticism. This is the merging of multiple distinct vowels and diphthongs. We're talking iota, eta, epsilon, epsilon iota, omicron iota, and upsilon iota, all collapsing into a single identical E sound. It radically simplified the vowel system and, for sure, completely altered the auditory landscape of Greek. Now, as you can probably guess, this massive shift caused some absolute comprehension headaches for the Greeks themselves. The Byzantine scholar Maximus Planudes famously wrote about the spelling chaos it caused. Because of italicism, the phrase "he will seize him" sounded exactly identical to "he will say it." Both were pronounced roughly as "eerie men." I mean, just imagine trying to take dictation when 6 different vowel spellings all make the exact same sound. Our final major phonetic plot twist here is syllosis. This is the gradual weakening and eventual total disappearance of the H sound from the beginning of words. In classical Greek, words often had a little rough breathing mark indicating an initial H sound. But as the centuries rolled on, the language just naturally smoothed out. The breathiness vanished entirely, and syllosis left those initial vowels completely unaspired.
All right, part 5, pitch accent to stress accent.
So the crucial point here is the rhythm of the language. Let's contrast classical Attic with Hellenistic Koine. On the left, we have the ancient pitch accent. Back in the 5th century BC, the accent on a word wasn't about volume at all. It was a musical tone. You literally hit a higher pitch on a specific syllable, which gave classical Greek this melodic, sing-song cadence. But by the Koine period on the right, this had shifted to a stress accent. Just like we do in English, the accented syllable became louder and slightly longer in duration. The ancient musical singing gave way to a volume-based rhythm.
And that finally brings us to part 6, the modern Greek system.
Let's move to this chart and see how this all builds across time by tracking just one single letter, beta. In 5th century BC Attic, it was a hard sound, like the B in bat. But by the 1st century AD Koine period, fricativization had started turning it into a softer V sound. By the 2nd century AD Lucian period, it was firmly a V, like in vat. And in modern Greek today, it remains exactly that, V. This just completely proves that modern Greek isn't some distant, unrelated cousin. It is a direct, living continuation of Hellenistic Koine. To sum it all up, modern Greek maintains a direct, unbroken continuity from the Roman and Byzantine periods. It perfectly preserves that stress accent that developed back in the Koine era. It naturally incorporates all the historical results of fricativization, itacism, and syllosis that we just talked about. And by fully embracing this living, breathing history, it completely dismisses the artificial, localized pedagogy of the Erasmian system. Which brings us to this incredibly beautiful piece of historical irony about Erasmus himself. As Benjamin Conter's research points out, when he read the New Testament, he read it with a pronunciation similar to that heard in Greece today. So yeah, even the namesake of the artificial classroom standard actually preferred the authentic, evolving sounds of the living Greek language.
So as we wrap up this explainer, I've got a question to leave you with. If you were deciding to learn ancient Greek today, armed with all this amazing knowledge of linguistic history, which historical system would you actually choose to speak? Would you go with the artificial classroom myth, or would you embrace the living, breathing sounds of antiquity? Thank you so much for exploring Professor Bento's fascinating research with me today. Keep learning, and I'll catch you in the next explainer.